Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm very happy to be here. I know there's a lot of confusion with the venue and a lot of people trying to cancel this event. And I'm wondering to myself, what is so dangerous about what I'm talking about? Like, what is so dangerous and subversive that I am not allowed to speak on a college campus? I'm going to just tell you my thoughts very openly and sincerely, and I want to hear from you. Like, what really is the problem? Because I can't understand it. I can't understand what is the problem with advocating something as simple as, there are two genders, there are men, there are women. Allah has created two genders and has said that the male is not like the female. In the Quran, there's differences between the genders. This is obvious. And each gender has been given a role to play in life by Allah. So if you look at the books of fiqh and the books of Sharia and Islamic law, there's not something that you'll find like a chapter on the roles of a man or a chapter on the roles of a woman. You won't find that in the books of fiqh. What you will find are descriptions of the rights and responsibilities of a husband, description of the rights and responsibilities of a wife, description of rights and responsibilities of a mother, of a father, of an aunt, an uncle, of a brother, your blood sister, your half brother, your half sister, your son, your daughter. Islam defines roles according to roles within the family. So this is significant because Islam is situating everything in context of a family, a marriage, and this is profound. This is something very deep because we live in a society and in a time where you are a person. You're identified as a person, an individual in society. And they've done an experiment, a social experiment, where they asked people in Western societies, like, complete this sentence: I am blank. I am blank. And in Western societies, people in Western societies will say things like, I am a marketer. I am a student. I am an athlete. I am a dreamer. That's how they will define themselves in terms of their jobs, in terms of their aspirations, in terms of their goals. Then you go to traditional societies like Muslim societies and you have the same experiment. I am fill in the blank. And in traditional societies, the main kind of things that they say is, I am a wife. I am a son. I am a Muslim, or I'm a community member, or I am a slave of Allah. These are the kinds of answers that are given. Relational, your relationship with others, with your family. This is a big difference in how we think of ourselves. The society that we live in is constantly trying to tear us away from these bonds. And the reason for that is simple: to individualize and atomize, make each of us his own or her own island, alone. Why? Because then it's easier to control, it's easier to manipulate you, it's easier to control you and your decisions, easier to make you into a consumer, easier to make you a pawn for the powers that be. Whereas if you are connected to others, you have a tribe, you have a family, you have cousins and uncles and aunts and step-aunts and extended family. This is a tribe. You have a community, a communal identity. people that you can rely on. All of these bonds are being destroyed, but they're not destroying it in a direct way. They're not destroying it in a way like they're not telling you explicitly, you need to be alone, you need to be isolated, you need to leave your family, leave your community. That direct approach will not work because people immediately reject it. Say, no, of course not, I'm not going to leave my family. I'm not going to abandon my parents. I'm not going to abandon my spouse, my husband, or I'm not going to abandon my wife. That direct approach is not going to work. They have to use an indirect approach. But it's an indirect approach that will play with your mind and will manipulate you. What is that? It's actually really clever. You just advocate for rights. You advocate for more and more and more rights. And everyone wants more rights. Oh, human rights is a great thing. We need more human rights. We need parental rights. We need children's rights. We need women's rights. Just give more and more and more rights. And that will break up families. That will break up marriages. How? How does that work? I'll use the example of children. Parents and children. This is a very important relationship in Islam. It's an important relationship in cultures. Your relationship with your parents, your relationship with your children. It's the closest human relationship that you can have. Maybe the marriage relationship is closer, but this is so important. In Islam, we know birr al-walidain, goodness to parents. We know that we have to be merciful to the young and respectful to our elders. These are important values in Islam. How do they destroy this? Well, they advocate for children's rights. So did you know that in some countries in Europe, it is considered child abuse to teach your children religion, your religion? If you as a parent teach your child something like Islam is the only religion acceptable by Allah, this is considered child abuse. You are indoctrinating your child into a cult. This is how they define it. If you teach your child, wear hijab, your daughter, you should wear hijab and you should not have a boyfriend and engage in zina, you are impeding the sexual freedom of your child. This is child abuse. And you'll have government agencies that will actually come and confiscate your children and basically kidnap your children. This is happening in Sweden right now. Because what Sweden did, because they have a demographic problem, they have been trying to pull Syrian refugees into Sweden, actively campaigning and marketing, like, come to Sweden, we're going to have a better life for you in Sweden. So you have so many Syrian refugees going to Sweden, and then in Sweden they don't really know the system, they don't really know the culture, and they don't realize that the government is watching. They send their kids to school, and the teachers in those schools are going to ask the children questions. Does your mom do this? Does your dad do this? Do your parents tell you have to wear hijab? Do your parents say that Qawm Lut is something bad? Do they say anything against the rainbow? Like, they'll ask you those kinds of questions. And if the child gives the wrong answers, then they call what's called social in Sweden, or in the US is called Child Protective Services, that will come and literally confiscate the child and say these are abusive parents who are violating the rights of the children. So if you criticize that policy, they'll say that, well, you're against children's rights? You're a monster. You're against children's rights. You want children to be abused by their parents. You're pro-abuse. You're pro-child abuse. You're a monster. That's how they justify it. We want to empower children. We want to empower children. And what they're doing basically is they also will teach the children. They'll teach them that, look, your mom and dad, they don't have any right to tell you what to do. Your parents, you don't have to obey your parents. You don't have to accept what they tell you to do. You're a free person. You have rights. They don't have the right to force you to pray. What does the Prophet ﷺ advise when it comes to prayer for children? You encourage the child to pray, your child to pray at around age 7. And then at age 10, if they don't pray, then you can, lightly punish them, to encourage them, discipline them, so that they pray and they get into the habit of prayer before they reach puberty. This is the sunnah. This is the parenting, tarbiyah advice of the Prophet ﷺ. This is considered child abuse. How are you having, you missed your prayers today, therefore you're grounded. Or you missed your prayers, so you can't go, play basketball with your friends in the park. This is abuse. You're abusing your child. You might think I'm exaggerating, but this is really the standard in Europe, in many European countries. Did you know in Germany, for example, they've completely outlawed any kind of schooling outside of their school system. You can't homeschool your children. There's no such thing as Islamic school that you can send your children. I mean, there is an exception for one religion, but not Islam. You can't send your children to Islamic schools. They don't exist. You can't homeschool. You have to send them to the state school. And again, the justification for this is we're empowering children. We're empowering them. We're giving them rights. We're protecting a child's human rights. So this is how. So what is this system that is constantly advocating for more and more rights, advocating for equality? How is equality involved here? They say that, well, your parents and your parents are equal. You're both people. You both have human rights. So there's no recognition of a hierarchy of a parent over children. That's inequality. That's bad. So they're advocating equality. They're advocating human rights. They're advocating empowerment. All sound like great things. This is wonderful. But what is the effect? It destroys one of the most crucial, critical human relationships. So what is the system that's doing this? This is liberalism. This is called the system of liberalism. So I'm not talking about liberal as in Democrat. Liberalism is an overarching philosophical system that is shared by every Western political party. Like, you cannot be a politician in the West and not fall under this umbrella of liberalism. There's just different flavors of liberalism, but it's all the same thing. And it all operates in the same way, advocating more and more rights, more and more empowerment, more and more equality. This is how they're destroying humanity. This is how they're atomizing us, making us individuals by ourselves, disconnected from our own family, our own spouses, our own community. But you see how this kind of mindset extends. Like, look at how it destroys communities. How do you have a functioning, powerful community that is able to be organized, is able to be active, is able to, really make a difference? You have to have a community structure. You have to have a hierarchy, an organization. There has to be a chain of command. Every single army in the world has a chain of command. Every single nation, government has a chain of command. Every successful organization has to have that organization or that system of every member plays a role in the organization. If you take out that hierarchy and you make everyone on equal footing, everyone is the same, then you have no more organization. You have no more leadership. You have no more drive. No organization, no nation, no army can survive without a chain of command and without hierarchy. This is a basic human fact. It's because of human nature. Like many animals that just naturally organize themselves. So if you notice geese, when they fly south, they form a certain structure, a V structure when they're flying, and they're following the leader. And did someone teach them to fly in that way? No, that's natural. Or if you look at ants, there are each kind of ant has its own role. So there's the queen, there are worker ants, there are soldier ants, there are ants that take care of the larvae. These are all roles, and did anyone teach the ants how to do this? No, they fall into the roles that Allah has given them, and they're able to thrive as a species for millions of years. These are ants. Humans, similarly, we organize into structures naturally. This is human nature. But what does liberalism say? It says, no, everyone is equal in your community. So if you have an imam who's an authority, well, who made him the boss? Who made him the leader? What makes him special compared to anyone else? You need to have elections. And it doesn't matter if so-and-so is the most qualified, the most knowledgeable, the most capable. No. Subject it to everyone else's opinion. Make it into this whole spectacle. Why should you take the words of the imams as if they're authoritative? No. That's just the opinions of some people. Other people have different opinions. There's ikhtilaf. There's no authority for you to follow. So in this way, they dissolve hierarchy, they dissolve organization, they dissolve community leadership. This is how they destroyed the Muslim community. They've been doing it. And they did it on a colonial level as well. When they colonized the Muslim world throughout the 19th century and 20th century, that is how they destroyed communities. First of all, they liquidated the funding that masajid and madaris, the madrasa system, had. They confiscated all of those funds that were used to pay scholars so that they're independent and they don't have to rely on government to live and to teach. So there's things called awqaf, the waqf system. What is the waqf? It means millions of dollars, in their currency that is saved and put fi sabilillah, donated by wealthy Muslim individuals, so that there is a large pool of funding that can be used for major projects, public projects, religious projects, like building masajid, like beautiful, the greatest architectural wonders of the world are the masajid that were built, the mosques that were built through awqaf, through the waqf, these funds. What did the colonial powers do? They liquidated. They seized all of that money so that it's centralized. The government now controls all of that funding, and the government decides, with the government which is connected to the European colonizer, the government decides who gets that money. Oh, you're an imam who is going to speak out against colonization? Okay, guess what? You're not getting a salary. You're not going to be able to live. You have to go be a taxi driver to survive and feed your kids. That's in the best case. In the worst case, we're just going to kill you. Right? So this is how you take control of Islamic institutions of learning. You control the imams. And now there's just other, even more sophisticated ways that they maintain controls of our educational institutions and our community leadership. So this is attack on the family, attack on community. What about attack on marriage? Same thing. An advocacy of equality, advocating empowerment, advocating women's rights. And then if you point out that, hey, this increase, these rights and this empowerment that you're advocating is destroying marriage, what is the response that you get? Okay, you're a woman hater. You're a misogynist. You're against women's rights. You're a rape apologist, for example. Like, these are the kinds of things people are saying about me coming and speaking here. So this is how do you say, like 3D chess? Like, people don't understand that, look, these are your enemies. Your enemies that want you to be unhappy, and they want to split you up. Either prevent you from getting married in the first place, or if you do get married, they want your marriage to be miserable, for you to hate the experience and to get divorced as fast as possible. That is their plan. That is their goal. And that goal is proven by all of the statistics that show how much marriage as an institution is being destroyed. And you can find academic articles that say marriage as we know it is dead. Marriage as an institution is about to die. It's about to be extinct. And we haven't realized it yet. No, we haven't realized that this institution is on its way out. And it's bad news if you're in college. If you're in this situation as a college student, you're not married. Unfortunately, I wish I had better news to give you. But this is the reality. And I want to share with you why this is the case. Why is this death happening? So that you can at least identify the source of the problem and you don't repeat the mistakes that others have made. And I'm not trying to blame one gender. If I wanted to blame one gender, I would definitely blame men. I would blame Muslim men as well, Muslim brothers, who they don't stand up and demand Islamic standards. Men are supposed to be leaders. That is the Islamically defined role for Muslim men. If you don't step up and you don't stand up and demand Islamic standards for how you live your life and how you conduct your friends and family and your community according to the standards of the Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then you have failed as a man, you have failed as a human being in the sight of Allah. You have been given a responsibility and a role to play. And Allah has given you the capability as a man. You are physically capable, you are mentally capable, you are emotionally capable, and you are spiritually capable. You have a responsibility to step up. This is not a time to be afraid, to be a coward, to say, oh, I need to, just be diplomatic in this situation and I don't want to rock the boat. If not now, then when? Especially when you're in college, this is the pinnacle of your youth. I'm telling you, you're not going to have more energy at any other time in your life than when you're in college. That's a fact. And if now you are not grinding and trying to push yourself, push your friends, push your family with wisdom, with hikmah, but you have a direction, you have an energy and a direction, fi sabilillah, for the sake of Allah. How do you expect anything to change? There is not a person here that I can ask, are you satisfied with the state of the ummah? Are you satisfied with our situation in the world as Muslims? Are you satisfied with what's happening in society all around us? The injustices, the crimes against humanity that are happening right under our noses. Are you satisfied with that? There's not one of you that will say, yeah, I think everything is going in the right direction. I think everything is just wonderful. It's not one of you that is going to give that kind of response. Okay, so what are you going to do about it? What's your plan? It starts with taking a stand. It starts with making an intention that I am going to insist to the best of my ability on Islamic standard. And this is going to be very critical when you want to get married. When you want to get married, inshallah. Because if you insist on Islamic standards and Islamic gender roles, and if everyone insists on that, if all the brothers insist on that, all the Muslim men insist on that, then as leaders, that's their job to insist on it, and then sisters will follow. Sisters will follow suit. So you have to be the leaders, not expect others to take charge. So what are Islamic standards of marriage? Well, the most basic thing, like if we want to talk about gender roles, the most basic thing is leadership. Men are meant to be leaders, whether it's in the family, whether it's in the community, whether it's in a marriage. And this is proven by the example of the Prophet ﷺ. It's proven explicitly in the Quran. It's proven by the lives of the Sahaba. There are so many proofs, and we could dedicate many lectures to just bringing the proofs. But the most basic is just 3 words in Surah An-Nisa. الرجال قوامون على النساء. Simple. Translates to men are authorities over women. Men are authorities over women. The problem is that this very simple principle is not being communicated to the Muslim community. This is an ayah of the Quran, an important, critical ayah in one of the critical, important surahs of the Quran, Surah An-Nisa, that is very concerned about the rights and responsibilities of wives, daughters, family, parents, etc. It's a critical surah, and critical ayah within the surah is not being properly translated. They translate it as men are the protectors and maintainers of women. This is a mistranslation. If you go to the tafsir of this ayah, multiple tafsir meaning exegesis, the explanation, from all of the classical commentators, go to Ibn Kathir, go to Qurtubi, go to Jalalain, go to any of the commentaries of this verse. They all say Qawwamun is referring to leadership. Men are leaders over women. That is what the verse is saying. If that makes you feel uncomfortable, then you are uncomfortable with the speech of Allah. If you reject this, you are rejecting the speech of Allah. So don't call yourself a Muslim. Simple. There's no other way to put it. Now, does leadership entail certain qualities, certain responsibilities? Yes. Part of being a leader is to be responsible, to protect, to maintain, to care for, to even cherish. Those are all under leadership. Those are all aspects of leadership. But the core of the matter, the asl of it, is leadership. Men are leaders over women. So by translating Qawwamun as providers and protectors, they are hiding the core truth of this ayah. They're hiding the core message of this ayah. And this is something that is extremely dangerous, because it is tantamount to hiding part of the Book of Allah. Hiding part of the Book of Allah and teaching one part of it, hiding another part of it. And this is what past communities did, and that's why they went astray, because they hid parts of the book and they taught parts of the book. We're doing the same thing. People are doing the same thing. Muslims are doing the same thing when they mistranslate this verse. This is a huge attack on the deen of Allah, the speech of Allah. So, okay, leadership. This is critical for marriage. And again, if you've been indoctrinated with a liberal mindset, and you've been indoctrinated with this idea that the more rights that someone has, the better. The more empowerment someone has, the better. The more equality there is in a marriage, that's better. So anything that is speaking against that, like this verse of the Quran, is bad. Anything that is going to speak against empowerment, more and more women's rights, more and more equality, anything that goes against those things is bad. Therefore, I'm uncomfortable with this verse of the Quran, or I'm uncomfortable with this translation, this meaning of the verse of the Quran. I'm uncomfortable in my heart. Maybe I won't say it out loud. Maybe I won't articulate it in certain settings, but inside I have a doubt. I have a problem with this concept. The reason that you have the problem, the reason that you have this confusion, is because you've been indoctrinated by this liberal philosophy. You need to recognize that just like the parent-child relationship or the imam-congregation relationship has a hierarchy, a division of power, a division of roles. Just like any of those relationships require that kind of division, marriage is exactly the same way. There is no successful marriage that is based on 100% equality between husband and wife. It's impossible. And do you know who hates that kind of marriage more than anyone? Women. Women hate equality with their husbands. They hate it. You seem skeptical. But it's true. The main people who are opposed to equality in marriage are women. They say the opposite. Women say, of course, I want equality. I want more rights. I want to be empowered. I want to be strong and independent. And I need no man, and on and on. That's what they say with their tongues. But what are they actually feeling biologically, psychologically? The opposite. And this has been proven in many studies, and I don't need to cite you the studies. You can just reflect, especially if you're a sister. You can reflect on the truth. Do you want, like, okay, if there's perfect equality, imagine this scenario. You're walking with your hubby down the street, and there is a mugger that jumps out. Okay? And you just live in a dangerous part of town, imagine. Let's say like you're in Brooklyn. I don't know. And it's not dangerous, Brooklyn? Okay. Bronx. Okay, you're walking in the Bronx. Or Queens, okay. And you're getting mugged. It's like a monthly occurrence. Once a month you're getting mugged. Okay, so since it's an equality marriage, 1 month your husband stands, in front of the mugger and shields you from him. He says, here, take my wallet. But hey, it's equality. So next month, she comes and stands in front. Stay back, hubby, I got this one. Is that that's equality, right? It's not equality if the husband, every time there's danger, he has to step up and put his life on the line. How is that equal? That's not equal. How is that empowering? That is patronizing. That he's a man, he thinks he's stronger than me, he thinks he's more capable than me. No, I can stand up against, the knife stabbing me in the face. Right? Or again, you and your hubby, you're living, in a nice apartment or a nice house, and it's 2 a.m. and suddenly you hear a big crash of glass breaking in the living room, and you're in the bedroom. So equality, right? So are you going to do rock, paper, scissors to see who goes out and checks for the murderer that just broke in? Who's going to get up and confront the murderer that's just broken into your house? If there's equality, that's the way that you would behave. But clearly that's not the way that men behave, and that's not the way that women behave. There's an understanding of gender. That's gender roles. That's gender roles. Each sex has a role to play. And that's beautiful. When I describe this equality, between men and women standing up to threats of violence, you're disgusted by that. You find it offensive, what do you think of such a man who acts in that way, who will stand behind uses his wife as a human shield? I mean, there's no Israelis here, right? But yeah, so that's something disgusting. And why do you feel disgust? Did anyone teach you that? This is a scenario that I just made up, but you still have that reaction. Why? Because you have a nature. Allah has created you with this nature, and these gender roles are internalized in your biology, in your DNA. And this is what's so beautiful about Islam, is that it combines the revelation. Allah has sent revelation and guidance to match perfectly and beautifully with how Allah has created our nature. Allah has created Adam alayhi salam, our father. And then He created from Adam his spouse. So even with the creation, there is a kind of order. The man came first, and then his spouse came and fulfilled him in that beautiful way. So that is a complementary relationship, but it's not an equal relationship. It is not an equal relationship. So in marriage as well. So I'm making this claim that it's women who actually hate equality. I'll give you, a big term, but it's an important term. about female attraction, and that's called hypergamy. Have you guys heard of hypergamy? Raise your hand. Okay, so most of you haven't. Hypergamy means that women are attracted to men who are stronger than them, bigger than them, smarter than them, wealthier than them, higher status than them. And this is any woman. I've done this experiment many times. You ask the most hardcore feminist, what do you want in a spouse? Do you want a man who is smaller than you, like he's shorter than you? Say no, like they'll be offended by the question. Do you want, yeah, soy boy. Do you want a husband that like is literally weaker than you? They'll say no, like of course not. I want the 6 foot, 6 figures, 6-pack. That's what I want. Okay, so that's when they say that, like that's just an expression, but 6 foot, so that's referring to size. 6 figures, that's referring to wealth and status. 6-pack, that's referring to strength and fitness. So even the most hardcore feminist is going to say that. Well, that's hypergamy. That's hypergamy. That means you're aiming up. Men don't have that nature. Men are not necessarily going to be attracted to status to the same extent as women. Men are primarily interested in physical attraction, physical beauty. So this is a big gender difference, but it makes a huge difference for marriage. Because when you're in a marriage and you are trying to make the marriage as equal as possible, you are actually making the woman less and less attracted to her husband. And I can give you so many examples, so many stories of men who they didn't step up. They didn't apply Islamic standards. They just accepted this kind of BS, compassionate imam nonsense from, Yaqeen Institute. And they thought that I'm going to be happiest in my marriage if I just empower my wife as much as possible. Give her as many rights as possible. Just treat her like a queen. Treat her like a princess. Every day I'm going to bring her, a new gift, and I'm going to just lavish her with all kinds of attention, and it's going to be amazing. I'm going to cherish every, thing that she says. This is being a soy boy. This is being a simp. And I'll tell you why this is bad. Women themselves, trust me, it might sound lovely at first, but you get tired of it. You get tired. You will actually be disgusted. And because your biology, your psychology, you have those instincts that tell you, why is he acting in this way? Does he not have anything else going on in his life? Is he a loser? That he's acting like this? That's how, even if you won't think of it consciously, you will feel it. And your attraction to him will drop. The novelty will wear off very, very quickly. Because acting in that kind of way, it signals subconsciously a weak man who is not going to be the best provider, doesn't have that high status. And women won't consciously know this, they will subconsciously feel it. Another example, men who are constantly promoting their wives to go and pursue higher and higher education, higher and higher career status. What ends up happening in some cases, not all cases, is that the wife starts becoming more successful than her husband. Her salary passes his salary. She's making more money. She is in a higher position at her job than he is at his job. In 99% of those cases, it ends up in divorce. And it's not because the man is insecure. The man is the one who has encouraged him to pursue, or the man is the one who has encouraged her to pursue that career advancement. He's been her biggest cheerleader. So it's not that he's insecure about her success. In reality, she's disgusted with him. She's thinking to herself, look, I'm making this much money. I have this kind of position, and I have all of these more successful guys at my job. John from accounting, he's 6 foot. He's making 6 figures, a lot more than my husband. Why am I wasting time with this loser? I deserve better. This is the nature of women. This is the nature of women. It would be the same, like for men to understand what this means. It's like if you married your wife and you're attracted to her, you marry her, and then she gains 100 pounds. What would that do to your attraction to your wife? It would decrease. Like, you'd still love her. You wouldn't tell her, hey, honey, maybe cut out the chocolate bars after every meal. Like, maybe you would be very nice and polite and kind. But the reality is you would feel less attraction to her. The same exact thing happens when she has reached a higher status than you as a husband. She starts looking at you like you would look at her had she gained 100 pounds. That's what hypergamous attraction means. And again, she might be nice about it. She might not say, oh, you're a loser, you're a bum. She might not even think it in those terms. But what she feels is less attraction. So marriages are destroyed by equality. Marriages are destroyed by empowerment. Marriages are destroyed also by just infinity rights. Like, give women all the rights for everything. This will actually destroy the marriage, just like it will destroy the relationship that parents have with their children. If you give infinity rights to a child or community members, if you give infinite rights to community where you don't have to respect the imam, you don't have to listen to the imam, you don't have to follow his direction, whether it's the emir or the imam in your community, that destroys that relationship. That destroys that institution of community. Similarly, if you give women these rights, you're destroying the marriage. So, does that mean we're against women's rights? Of course not. Women have rights. Wives have rights. And mothers have rights. And those are cherished rights that we have to fight for and protect. No doubt about it. But they're defined. They're defined by the Quran and Sunnah. But the liberal project is, no, we have to give more and more and more. We have to expand the rights that women have far beyond what Islam has claimed, to such an extent that now you're infringing on the rights of the husband. Now the husband's rights are not being met in Islam, but because there's such an emphasis on women's rights, you don't care. What's so important is that we constantly tell husbands, okay, if you don't meet every single demand that your wife has, then you're an abuser. You are a misogynist, abusive wife beater. Even if you don't lay a finger on her, you have caused emotional abuse. You've beat her emotionally. Seriously, that is the definition of abuse has expanded to such an extent. Like, for example, one of the big issues is that became a meme is, my money as a woman. My money is my money and his money is my money. Is this valid in Islam? Nope. No, it's not, of course. In Islam, every person's wealth is his or her own. There are obligations that a husband has or a father has to provide for his wife. But that doesn't mean she's entitled to control all of his wealth. Islam is very clear on this. There's no difference of opinion. So if you're a man and you have, $1 million, that's your wealth and property, and you get married, she's not entitled to that $1 million. She's entitled to a certain standard of living. Like if you live in a nice house, she's entitled to live in a nice house. You have nice clothes, she's entitled to have nice clothes. You eat at nice restaurants, she's entitled to eat in nice restaurants. You have to provide for her according to your standard of living, and she has a right to that. And if you don't provide that, then she has actually a legal complaint against you. She has a legal complaint in the court of Islamic law and in the court of Allah, Because Allah will also hold you accountable for this injustice. You are violating the rights of your wife. That is dhulm. That is injustice. And any man who does that is a deadbeat. No doubt about it. Like, we have no shame in calling out deadbeats. But does that mean that she is entitled to all of his money or half of his money? And she can make decisions. She has to have access to all of his bank accounts. And she has to know exactly what you have, when you have it. No. This is contrary to Islam. So you are actually, if you insist on this kind of sharing of wealth, you are violating the man's rights in the sight of Allah. And then you are liable in the court of Allah. You are liable on Yawm al-Qiyamah, that Allah will ask, why did you take more than what you were entitled to? Why did you lay claim to the wealth of your husband? Did I give you right to his money, to his wealth, to his property? How are you going to, as a sister, as a Muslim woman, going to answer Allah in that situation? You have appropriated something that was not yours. That is theft. And those who steal property on Yawm al-Qiyamah, that wealth that has been stolen will be on their necks, literally, weighing them down. Is that what you want? That's what happens when you accept this liberal feminist doctrine that his money is my money and my money is my money. What are you setting up for yourself on Yawm al-Qiyamah? When we say fear Allah, this is what we're talking about. Fear Allah. Don't let these whims and desires, these false ideologies confuse you and misguide you and lead you to ruin on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Because you preferred that over the deen of Allah. You preferred that nonsense over the deen of Allah. Protect yourself. Protect yourself from that. One of the most important, critical rights that a husband has over his wife is to demand obedience. So this becomes a controversial issue. But this is what it means to be a leader. When you are the leader, you're the head of the household, then that's what a chain of command means. That you have a certain authority and you require a certain level of compliance and obedience. Does that mean you're a tyrant? Does that mean that you take advantage of your position? Does that mean you ignore the feelings of your wife? Does that mean you belittle her and you dominate her to make her feel low? No, not at all. And anyway, that's not what an effective leader is. An effective leader, the most effective leader is the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How was he with his wives? And we see that compassion, that love, cherishing his wives, taking care of them, being very concerned about how they feel at any given time. But there's also lines. So at certain points, if his wives were demanding too much of him, then he would draw the line and he would say that this goes beyond the line. He would have a limit. And they also, because of their excellent character and their, as mothers of the believers, they would know, okay, we obey the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We obey Allah and we obey the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That was understood. What is the feminist model of marriage? Me obey him. Why? He should obey me. We're equal partners. That is equality marriage. This is completely contrary to the Quran and the Sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Kullukum ra'in." All of you are shepherds, and everyone is responsible for his flock. The man is the shepherd of his family. The mother is the shepherd of her children and managing the household. The imam is shepherd of his community. This is Sahih Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So in this Hadith, it's clear roles that are defined. The husband is shepherding his family. So is a shepherd going to, for example, take his stick his shepherding stick and just beat the sheep senselessly? No. But if the sheep are going in the wrong direction, he gently taps them to get them in the right direction. That's what a shepherd does. He's shepherding them. And similarly, the sheep are not going to attack the shepherd because the shepherd is taking care of them. But again, there's a chain of command. There's an order. And that's what makes the family successful. If you start subverting that, then you destroy the marriage. So with obedience, this is something very important. And it comes with a certain personality trait called agreeableness. This is a feminine personality trait that is also being attacked constantly. Women are being told that you need to be aggressive, you need to be competitive, you need to be strong, you need to be independent. These are all masculine personality traits that are being applied to women. What is the result of this? It's making women manly. It's making women turn into men, basically. And so instead of having a marriage between a man and a woman, you have a marriage between two men. It's like gay marriage has been normalized, right? It's a biological female, but she has the psychology and personality of a man. Is this going to work? No. It's going to be a disaster because you have two sides that are constantly fighting and competing with each other. Whereas the Islamic model is one of complementarity. Your complementary roles. The man has a certain kind of attitude and a certain kind of personality. He's more competitive. He is more emotionally, I don't want to say emotionally stunted, but he's more emotionally reserved. That's actually something very valuable in a marriage because sometimes you as a family have problems and there are difficulties and you need someone who's going to be emotionally strong in that moment to think clearly and to take care of business in that difficult situation. Men, that comes more naturally to men. What comes more naturally to women is being softer, being more agreeable, being more diplomatic, being more in touch with emotion, with feeling. That makes them great, excellent in the family context because they're like the glue that holds the family together. They're the glue that they smooth over difficulties and fights and conflicts. Maybe you've noticed this, your mom, for example, is really good at getting your dad to, relax. And she's really good at making sure that your, cousins are all happy and communicating. And if there is a fight, it's going to be smoothed over by her or your sister or your aunt. They have that kind of emotional intelligence that men don't have. So that's their role. That's the role that Allah has given them, and He has created them to have this kind of softness and gentleness. The feminist perspective is to say, no, softness means that you're weak. If you're soft, if you're emotionally more vulnerable, that's weakness. You need to be more like a man. They won't say be more like a man. They'll just say be strong, be independent, be competitive. That's the kind of message that's given. So this society is basically like a giant transgender experiment. Like every gender is being experimented on. Women are being turned into men and men are being feminized because they've stigmatized masculinity. They even call it toxic masculinity. And it's considered a psychological disorder according to the official American Psychological Association. You have toxic masculinity if you're more emotionally reserved. You have to be constantly talking about your feelings. This is not masculine, and it's actually dysfunctional. Men cannot operate. They cannot be in that role of protecting. How can you be a protector and a provider if you're constantly having an emotional breakdown? Or you can't operate without constantly expressing your feelings. You're not going to be able to face those challenges that will come at you, and they don't stop for no one. So these are the kinds of considerations that are causing the destruction of marriages and Muslim marriages are not immune from this. So with that, I think we have, that's like half the speaking time. So the second half, we'll just have open Q&A. And if you don't want to say your question out loud, I guess you can write it on a piece of paper, or maybe you can text it to one of the organizers if you don't want to say it out loud, and then we can just discuss these issues, inshallah. Oh, and one more thing to pitch. So if you're interested in like a more in-depth discussion of these topics, there's a course that my wife teaches. My wife is Khalid. She's online. You can follow her on Facebook. But she has a course that is like a 20-hour course that goes into gender roles. The name of the course is Wife School. And a lot of women and men have taken it. A lot of people have said that the course actually has saved their marriage. So it's a beneficial course. I highly recommend it. It's on. If you want more details, you can ask the president as well. He can give you the website for it.
So my question is, first on our list, I heard from one of the biggest challenges in society is having men go along with their responsibilities. So they're the providers, the protectors, the one who are supposed to be leaders, but then they aren't ones that they want to stay home. There's some people that want to stay home, and this country kind of encourages, stress days and this and that, right? And then the challenge for women is to, stay at home. Prophet has encouraged women to stay at home, right? Because there are certain responsibilities there that need to be attended, as well as the protection, right? Their job is that they want to be seen outside. So how do you suggest that each party maintains those responsibilities, or how do you get people to be encouraged to do so?
Thank you for the question. That's a good question. I think that when it comes to brothers, there are a lot of things that are contributing to challenges for men in general. Like if you look at the college graduation rates, women are 60% of graduates and men are 40%. There are more men who are failing out of high school, of college. When it comes to PhD, more women are pursuing those kinds of positions. There's increasingly this underperformance by men. And I think there are certain factors that contribute to that. One of them is, society is stigmatizing males in general. So the things that really make men is being stigmatized. Like you're toxic if you have masculine characteristics. So when you preach that, then a certain percentage of men are going to become depressed. They're going to feel anxiety and not really realize what is the cause of this anxiety. It's a whole social confluence of factors that is causing a lot of depression. And when you're depressed, you don't have the energy to pursue something like a job or to pursue something like providing for your family. So this is a crime against men. That's one part of it, and I think that men need to support each other. And really, we need to revive these masculine characteristics. We need to encourage each other. We need to support each other. That's what is really valuable in a community. As Muslims, we have a community. So we have to use it to help each other and pump each other up. That's number one. For women, when it comes to staying in the home, it's hard for them to go against so much propaganda that is telling them, no, if you stay at home, then you're a failure. And my own wife went through this problem. Like she felt torn. She felt that, okay, Islam is telling me one thing, but society is saying that if I follow Islam in this way, I'm a failure. But then we got married young, so she was 22 and I was 23, alhamdulillah. So she didn't have to really experience going out and working and dealing with those stresses. But she had friends and family who were women who did have to deal with that. And the report that she got from those women is that life is really stressful. Life is really hard. I wish I didn't have to worry about my job and answering a manager and facing, 8 a.m. meetings and meeting deadlines and having to file taxes and all of this. I wish I could just be a housewife. I wish I could just be a mother. And usually at a certain age, the biological instinct for motherhood really shifts into high gear. And this is usually in the late 20s or early 30s, where women just have this really strong desire for children. And if they're stuck in a career, they haven't gotten married, they haven't even began to think about marriage, it's a disaster. And the thing is that it leads to a biological wall. They can't, because in terms of fertility, after a certain point, women's fertility drops significantly after age 35. So there is a biological window, a biological clock. And if you don't meet that, then you're not going to be able to have children. I think the battery on the mic is dying. So if women need to realize that you don't have that much time to get married and have children, the sooner that you pursue that, the better. You trust me, you will be happier. Your life will be more fulfilled. There is no 60-year-old, 70-year-old, 80-year-old woman who looks back and says, oh, I wish I hadn't had children and spent more time making PowerPoint for my Fortune 500 job. There's no woman who thinks that. So what does that tell you? And you have women now who are freezing their eggs, basically. They've reached a certain point where they're not married, they haven't found a suitable partner, but their eggs are not going to be viable, so they have to freeze them. And what ends up happening is that the technology is not perfect, so they end up losing the eggs and they never have children. It becomes like a source of lifelong regret. So this is all human nature, but society is constantly getting both men and women to go against their nature. If you learn about what human nature is, and you learn what Islam is telling you to do, then you're going to be much happier in the long run. Okay, let me answer some of these questions that were forwarded. What do you think about the free mixing in the recent Light Upon Light event where Mufti Menk attended? So, it's very specific. Yeah, so there's a great video that I recommend. It's by a UK YouTuber named Bro Haji. And he goes into a lot of depth in the danger of free mixing and why it's against Islam. And he also comments on Mufti Menk. So I would recommend watching that, Bro Haji, on YouTube. What if a husband is constantly dismissing a wife's emotional needs and doesn't make her feel emotionally safe? That's definitely bad. So in some marriages, there's just a breakdown in communication. There's also this misunderstanding that being masculine and being a strong man means that you have zero emotions, which is not true. You, as a man, you do have emotions, and you should be emotionally receptive, even if it doesn't come naturally to you. So, this is a part of the mercy, the rahmah, and the sakina between husband and wife. You have to be understanding of each other's needs. So when I come back from work, I've had a long day, I've faced all kinds of stress, and then I come home and I just want to relax. And I don't want to think about anything. I definitely don't want to talk about my feelings. But my wife, well, she hasn't had contact with someone to talk face to face, share what her feelings are, what her challenges were for the day. That's the way that women connect, is through talking about their feelings. So she has certain needs, I have certain needs. How do we reconcile? They're opposite needs. I want to be left alone, she wants to talk. We compromise. I take the first hour after I come home from work to rest, to eat something, to relax, to freshen up. And then after that, there's time for me and her to talk. Mostly I'll listen She'll share, every detail of her day, and that's how we bond and we meet each other's needs. So you have to make compromises in marriage, and that's natural. Someone who doesn't make compromises, like a husband who doesn't make compromises, and it's always my way or the highway. I don't care what your needs are. I don't care what emotions you have. I'm a strong man. I'm masculine. No, this is stupid. This is against Islam, and this is not true masculinity. This is not true leadership. A good leader has to take into account the feelings of his team. A good leader, like an imam, the imam has to be in touch with the needs of his community. He has to hear about their needs and communicate with them. Similarly, a father, a husband, he has to be sensitive to the needs of his family. That's just basic leadership 101, and it's best exemplified with the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What if you meet a man and you connect with him and you get along well, but professionally speaking, you're more qualified than him? Should you not pursue this relationship for marriage? Will it be an issue, and should the woman find a man more qualified than her? Yes, this most likely will be an issue. So just because you're professionally, let's say like you're professionally more qualified than him, but he has some other high status. He has some other kind of attribute that makes him high status. Maybe he's like filthy rich. He has a lot of money, but he just doesn't have a professional job. So technically you're higher in position professionally, but he has more money. So that could still work because he is higher status. The only time that it's a problem is if he is lower status than you. It's going to make a difference in the long run. And I'm speaking from experience, from many cases of women who thought, look, I like the guy, he's good looking, he's funny, he's nice, we get along. They convince themselves that they're okay with the fact that he is not making as much money as she does. They convince themselves of that. But then she starts nagging him like, why don't you try harder? Why are you going out with your friends again? Like, you need to go and work harder. Why are you not pushing for a raise at your job? Why are you not pursuing that opportunity? It becomes a source of major tension. So that's something that you don't want to deal with. And the best way, if you get along with him, and he's just not doing as well professionally, leave your job. Why do you need a job? Leave your job. That solves the problem instantly. Be a housewife. And force him to meet his responsibilities to provide for you. And trust me, you will be much happier. The satisfaction that you will get from being dependent on your husband, like fully dependent. Like, this is the lie that feminism tells women, that if you're dependent, you're going to be miserable. If you're dependent, you're going to hate it. You're going to be in danger if you're dependent. This is a lie, because biologically, the more dependence that you feel as a woman, the more in love you are. You love your husband so much more. You are so much more attracted to him when you're dependent on him. As you get more and more independent from him, your attraction actually decreases. Your love decreases. This is also, any kind of relationship is like that. Like our dependence on Allah. We depend so much on Allah. And we're in complete dependence on Him. That creates so much love that we have for Allah. So I recommend, if you really like the person, he's a good Muslim, you think that he's compatible, then the best solution is just leave your job. Become a housewife. I promise you, inshallah, you're going to be much more satisfied and happier. Do you think it's okay to have a monthly allowance for the wife? Also, what are rights of a wife over their husband? Yeah, I think it's good. I can't say that it's obligatory, like a man is required to give his wife an allowance, but it's always good to give your wife some money to spend on her, things that she just wants. So sometimes she gets the need to go shopping. So she should, if you can afford it, go shopping, go out to eat with, in a halal environment, go with friends in a halal environment and have that social time. Sometimes that costs money. So you should provide that for your wife, no problem. Yeah, brother.
So my question is, since we're talking about the rights that women have on their husband, what I think what's being underestimated, especially in this century, is the man's rights and their obligations. So for example, if you heard the story what happened with our brother Andrew Tate, that he's falsely accused of rape. They were not able to prove it. And that's number one. So for example, if a woman in Islam oppresses her husband by withholding sex, for example, or he wants to marry a second or third or fourth wife, which is his right, for example, and the wife goes using sex as a weapon, or basically, using that Western legal system and the Islamic legal system when it's fit for them. So how do we deal with that? So basically my question is 2 points. What is our rights and responsibilities as men to our wives or sisters? And second thing, how do we deal with sisters who are using both when it suits them, the Western legal system, and then when it suits them, they go to Islam?
Yeah, so when it comes to the responsibilities of a husband, this is also related to the previous question. What are the rights of a wife over her husband? So the wife is entitled to maintenance. So I mentioned earlier, like having a certain lifestyle, not having to worry about paying rent. She has no responsibility to go and work and make money. Her, in terms of food, in terms of clothes, in terms of place to live, all of these need to be provided according to what is ma'ruf, or what is known as a reasonable thing for their place in society. And the wife shouldn't take advantage of that and have, I know a very sad story of one brother who came to me at one of these conferences, and he said that, brother, my wife is saying that I need to take out loans, like riba loans, because she's saying I have to pay for a better lifestyle, because our friends have really expensive cars and really expensive clothes. They live in a very big house with professionally interior decorated, and I can't afford that on my salary. So I have to take out loans in order to meet this standard. And she's saying she's like a practicing Muslim sister with hijab going to the masjid. It's like, where is she getting this idea that you can take loans, something that is haram to take a ribawi loan for this purpose? That, well, this is what the imam say, the so-and-so celebrity imam said, that you have to meet your wife's needs to reach that level of status of your friends. So there's a lot of misinformation on the responsibility of wives. When it comes to sex, then the wife has to be available for that. Generally available. She should not try to weaponize it or use it as a kind of weapon against her husband. But does that mean that whenever he wants, he can just jump on her and she has no say in the matter? No, that's not right. Sometimes people are tired, they're not in the mood. That's you as a husband, you need to be respectful of that, be considerate of that. But like I said, there are some women who are weaponizing this. They're weaponizing their this accommodation from the husband and turning marriage into a nightmare. So marriage is ultimately about compromises. You have to make compromises. There are conflicts that are inevitable, especially in the first 5 years of marriage. So you have to learn to make compromises and to communicate and work together. Also, you mentioned about the responsibilities of the wife. That's the main responsibility, is to be sexually available, for her to obey him, ask permission when leaving the house. Don't think that you can just leave the house whenever you want. Just some really basic rights that Islam gives the husband that's being violated. There are some women that I'm hearing, Muslim women, that are going to the masjid and wearing hijab, maybe even wearing niqab, and they say, yeah, I'm just going to leave town and I'm going to go fly and see my family, or I'm going to go fly to the other part of the country to see my friends, and just making that decision, buying the ticket, using his money, and just leaving without asking permission. This is haram. You're violating the rights of your husband to just leave the house without his permission. So that's a big one. When it comes to household chores, this is also something that women should take responsibility for. Again, feminism is brainwashing women and saying, oh, this is beneath you, why shouldn't he do it? It should be 50-50, blah, blah, blah. But I'm telling you, accept the division of labor. Accept that. Look, outside of the home, there are so many challenges, so many stressful situations, so many difficulties. Let your husband deal with that. Let that be his role. And then you take on the role as a wife of cooking, of cleaning, making sure that is so important. Like, how can we belittle food? Like, food is such an important part of life, and women are responsible for that. They should be responsible for that. Do you know how much that enriches your family's life when you take the care to cook a fresh meal, every day or every other day, and you are providing that? Do you know like how much barakah is in that, how much blessing, and how some of the greatest women, not even mentioning the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the sahabiyat, guess what? All of them, 99.99999% of them, were cooking and cleaning in the home. So you want to be like the mothers of the believers, you want to follow the Quran and Sunnah, cook and clean. Cook and clean. And Allah will elevate your status when you do that. You're feeding, like, just imagine in Ramadan, what is the reward for feeding a fasting Muslim? And you're doing that every day of Ramadan. You're providing food. You're making suhoor to facilitate that fasting. Do you know how much hasanat you're getting from these kinds of behaviors? Don't let this feminist scum atheist tell you that, oh, you're just a slave and, oh, you're just, worthless, you're cooking for your family. We don't judge things by what these feminists say, these atheists who hate God. And they hate Islam. They hate our Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They're not our teachers. We spit at them. What Islam says, what Allah says, is that this is a blessed role of a mother, of someone who is taking care of her family, her children, her husband. This is how you get close to Allah. You get close to Allah through this kind of obedience. And the hadith is clear that the woman who dies and her husband is pleased with her, she goes to Jannah. How much easier can it get? How much easier can it get to do that? So, throw this feminism in the trash, seriously. And then appealing to the legal system. Yeah, you're appealing to the kufr legal system, atheistic legal system, to commit dhulm and oppression on your spouse, on your husband. Because let's be honest, the legal system in the West, and increasingly now in the Muslim world, is a feminist legal system. It's a secular legal system that will, if you divorce, you take half of your husband's wealth, you have the right to take his children away from him. This is dhulm. This is an oppression. And if there is no court on earth that will take you into account, Allah will take you to account on Yawm al-Qiyamah. So fear Allah. What should be the haya of men in general? Men should lower their gaze. Men should dress modestly. So, if you got some big guns, don't wear tight clothes. Guns, I'm referring to your arms. So, sorry. You guys acted like you didn't know what I was saying. If you have like big muscles, then don't, take pictures of your bulging muscles and post it on Instagram. This goes contrary to haya. Don't wear tight pants. Don't wear tight jeans. That, I'm not, pointing out anyone here, but just when I was growing up, we didn't have this tight jean phenomenon. People wore baggy jeans, and it was like much more modest. Then when I was in my 30s, I'm noticing this new fashion of very tight jeans. I'm like, oh, this fashion has changed, like standard fashion. But if you wear tight jeans, that contradicts hayat, modesty. Another aspect of modesty: don't talk to women, don't talk to strange women. Don't mix with them. Don't socialize with them. Don't joke with them. Save that for your family. Save that for your future wife. Okay, yeah, from the audience.
Yeah, so before you talked about the wealth, when people get married, and then you said a woman, they say that my money is my money and his money is my money. So in a marriage, how much of the husband's wealth is the wife's?
How much of the husband's wealth is the wife's? None of it. Only, so she has maintenance, unless he wants to give her a gift. Maybe the husband says, honey, here's a brand new Mercedes. This is yours. And the title of the car is in her name. Then that's her Mercedes. Or jewelry. Honey, here's some jewelry. I bought you this, gold bracelet or this diamond ring. That's her jewelry. Now you have no right over it. And you can't demand it back if you give these kinds of gifts. But other than that, then again, like you have $1 million, you have $1,000 in your bank account, that's your money, but you are expected to pay for the cost of living. Yeah.
What are the responsibilities of the husband at home?
The responsibilities of the husband at home. So this is something that I tell my wife all the time. She will say, because we have 5 children, alhamdulillah, and they're young, so sometimes someone will need a diaper change, to have the diaper changed. And she'll say, sometimes I change the diaper if she's doing something else, her hands are full, she can't do it, especially earlier in our marriage. Now I do diapers much less, but she'll say, I've changed all the diapers today. Why don't you take one diaper change? And then my response to her is that, what happens if the fridge stops working? What happens if the stove stops working? What if there is like some big bug that comes in the bathroom or in the garage? Then I have to change that diaper. I have to take care of that problem. What if the car needs an oil change? I have to change that diaper. What if, we get audited on our taxes? I have to change that diaper. You don't have to change that diaper. You have a much easier diaper to change of a baby. I have to deal with these big problems. So when it comes to those kinds of domestic responsibilities, men have to step up and take care of it. Like there's a bill that that has to get paid. That's a hassle. It's a headache. Men have to have that headache. So it balances out perfectly. If you have defined roles, things that are involving outside affairs of the house, men take responsibility for that. When it comes to cooking and cleaning and child rearing and inside the house, like taking care of children, then women are more suited for that. It leads to a lot of harmony. Yes?
You previously said that women out of both genders, they gain equality more, and their fitrah is more inclined to hypergamy. How would you respond if someone said, well, if that's the case, then why do most women in this country and throughout the world, they're more easily swayed by feminism?
So why are women more easily swayed by feminism if hypergamy is the case? They're not more easily swayed. It's years and years and years of indoctrination from basically kindergarten until you're adult aged. It's just constant brainwashing. And other cultures who don't have that brainwashing, they just do not understand. And this is actually the example of Afghanistan recently, because Afghanistan was occupied for 20 years. And one of the main projects of the U.S. occupying force was to liberate women. All of these, backwards Afghan women who want to stay at home and raise children, we have to liberate them so they want to go out and pursue careers. and it was a big failure. The American social workers and even academics who went to liberate these Afghan women came back frustrated. They said that we just can't convince these women that they're oppressed. We can't convince them that they are subjugated to the patriarchy and need to liberate themselves. They want to be housewives. They don't want to be empowered. That's the way that they describe it. And it's because there's not that cultural indoctrination constant in that society. If you don't have that cultural indoctrination and that constant brainwashing, the natural state of people have is it's 100% in line with Islam, 100% in line with these gender roles, these traditional gender roles. If women are being more encouraged to get married young, how would they ensure their partner is going to be able to lead and provide for them? So this is why in Islam we have the position of the wali. The wali is the guardian, usually the father of a woman, and that guardian is looking out for her interests and making sure that she marries someone who is suitable for her. This is called guardianship, and this is a beautiful, perfect system. The alternative that is being promoted is that women just can choose for themselves without any input from a man, let alone her father. And you are going to be empowered if you just forget about what your father wants and you ignore him, you just be an independent woman. But what ends up happening is how many women in this society, in Western society, are abused and taken advantage of by boyfriends, by men that emotionally manipulate them and take advantage of them. They play into their emotions. This is a kind of predatory behavior that some women are facing. But if you have a guardian, if you have a wali who is your advocate, then you're protected from this kind of manipulation, because the wali is not going to be charmed by some good-looking guy. If a man is allowed to smack his wife to discipline her, I'm reading the question. If a man is allowed to smack his wife to discipline her, shouldn't a wife also be allowed to smack her husband to discipline him and or get him back on the right track? So the thing is that, again, because of hypergamy, there is a power differential in the marriage. And this is something that both men and women want. Again, I can ask the sisters here, do you want to marry a man who is bigger than you, stronger than you, taller than you? And you'll all say yes. So if you're going to smack someone who is bigger and stronger than you, is that a smart strategy? It's not, right? But the thing is that there's perfect accountability. Like in Islam, there are checks and balances. So yes, there isn't equality in the marriage between a husband and a wife. But what if a husband is abusive? What if a husband is just beating his wife and just oppressing his wife with no reason, no justified reason? Then does that mean he's gets off scot-free? Does that mean that no one can take him to account? No, of course not. Because guess what? His wife has a father that can come and smack him. That wife has 2 brothers or 3 big, strong brothers that can come and smack him if he's violated her rights. She can go to the qadi, she can go to the judge and say that, look, he has violated my rights. And the qadi will figuratively smack him for that kind of injustice. So this goes back to that division of labor that I was talking about. When men are operating in the external sphere, in the public sphere, with their work, with their job and their responsibilities, then the accountability also comes from the external sphere. They're accountable to people on the outside, and they get smacked by people on the outside. Women are protected from those smacks from the outside. They're protected from having that burden and accountability from the outside. So does that mean that women have no accountability? No, they have accountability, but they have accountability on the inside, in the domestic sphere, by their husbands. See, this is a perfect balance of accountability. There are checks and balances in marriage. So no, the husband doesn't, it's not like he can do whatever he wants and violate her rights without any retribution. Sister asks, can she go to college to provide for her family if he isn't able to? If your husband is not able to? Yeah, so if there are many situations where you have no choice and you have to go work, you have to provide. Like there are emergency situations, there are health problems. Like what if your husband suffers from some major health problem, he can no longer work? Then in those cases, Allah make it easy for you, and you have to do what you need to do given the broken world that we live in. If we lived in a perfect world, if we lived in a world that was guided by Islam and was actually abiding by Islam, then if she is, she wouldn't be in a situation where she has to go work. There'd be others who would help to provide from her family to make sure that they are provided for given this kind of exigent or emergency situation. But since we don't live in a perfect world, we live in a sick world, then sometimes you have to do things that are not ideal. And that includes having to, go and work and pursue money in that way. What advice do you have for young Muslims, college students that want to get married, but the brother is not fully set or financially stable yet? So there is unless the brother is literally homeless, he is financially stable. Doesn't he have an apartment that he's living in? He's paying rent for that apartment, right? So what is needed, to be financially stable? You as a wife can live in that same apartment. You're just two people. You don't need a big place. You don't need a lot of money. This is something that we're just making it impossible. I know it's not you guys, it's parents. Parents who have these standards he has to be financially stable. He has to be, what does financial stability mean? How do you define that? And they set some arbitrary standard that is very unreasonable, especially given the worsening economic situation in society. So I always tell parents to be more supportive. Support your children getting married young. Don't set these arbitrary standards. Like a young couple, they can really have a lot of fun and enjoy life, getting married at 18 and 19, living, if it's a small apartment. They will enjoy life with very little means, with very little money, but they have each other. They have each other's company. And that's you can't put a dollar amount on that. You can't put any kind of... Okay, I'm back to brothers now, in the back.
I just want to ask, what does Islam say about women in more leadership roles? Because I've seen some Muslim states permissible, some states prohibited outright.
Yeah, so what kind of leadership role are we talking about? That's one of the questions here. Are women allowed to lead other women? Yeah, you can be a leader of an Islamic school, or you can be a leader of your own personal business. That kind of leadership is totally Islamic. But when it comes to leadership of the community, leadership of the family, the leadership of the marriage, then leadership of the nation, leadership of the ummah, then that is something that is reserved for men. And there are many hadith and also ayat of the Quran. As I mentioned, الرِّجَالُ قَوَّامُونَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ. Men are authorities over women. Also, the Prophet ﷺ said in a Sahih hadith that no people will be successful who appoint a woman over their affairs. This is referring to community, the communal context. And there's, this is also something that's rational. People will say that, well, I don't buy it. Women are 100% exactly as capable as men for everything. This is simply false. There are differences between the genders, and this is scientifically established that men and women have different capacities, they have different personalities, they have a different brain, literally our brains are structured differently. We behave differently, we have different emotions, we have different behaviors and instincts. These differences matter. And when it comes to leadership, this is something that men are more suited for, whereas women are not as capable in those when it's a communal position, especially a community that is facing a lot of pressure, that is facing a lot of external pressure from the outside. That's when you need men to be in charge. Yeah.
So here's a question that I have, me personally, when it comes to the education system. We're talking about in America, it's a little better, but when you talk about like financial stability, because we're in college and we make, for example, 40,000 is the average in America, 40,000 a year. Can we go get married if we still, let's say, live with our parents? We have to get an apartment. We have to, meet the needs. So
yeah, if everyone agrees, like your parents agree, your wife agrees, her parents, her wali agrees that, look, until I get on my feet, we're going to save money and we're going to, be at my parents' house. If everyone agrees, there's no problem with that. So why not? That makes a lot of financial sense, because you're working and you're not paying rent. So you're able to save money and you can live, much more comfortably, as opposed to paying rent and, every month having to pay off $1,000, $2,000 a month. That's money that you could be saving if you lived with your parents. Yes, bro.
I have a two-parter. So when it comes to the wali, my first part would be to what point, I guess, I don't know, to the God or whatever, does the wali have to be around? And the second part would be, when he is around, how close does he have to be? Is he close enough that he can hear it, or does he have to be close enough that he can see?
Yeah. So if the question is, if you're in the marriage process and you're talking to someone for marriage, obviously khalwa is not allowed. So khalwa means you can't be alone with the opposite sex in a room and the doors are closed and there's no windows. That's khalwa, so that's haram. But other than that, what usually happens is the brother will go to the sister's house or apartment with her family, and they're in the house somewhere. They're not necessarily in the room, and they're not necessarily able to hear, but they're in the living room and you're in the den with her, and you talk, and she asks you questions, you ask her questions, and you should try to be modest and lower your gaze as much as possible, but you can still see who she is, and she can see you, and the wali doesn't have to literally hear every single word, or
He doesn't necessarily have to be right next
no,
to him. Oh.
he doesn't necessarily even have to be there. He doesn't have to be in the house. It could be other family members. The wali that is actually needed for the nikah, that's just for the nikah. That's for the for that part. But for just asking, pursuing, what's the word for it? Proposal, yeah. Courtship, yeah. That's a fancy word for it. Then the wali doesn't actually have to literally be standing there or even being in the house. There can be others who are deputized to give him the information. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.